There's a lot to unpack when we look at the claims that global companies are, benefiting from the situation in Gaza. The report we're diving into mentions that tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are allegedly profiting from policies that help sustain the conflict.
Yep, right. The report by Francesca Albanese really hit on this idea that these companies, though not operating in a vacuum, are indirectly complicit. It seems so hard to reconcile the role of these companies with their supposed commitment to innovation and transparency, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're in two worlds at once. On one side, you have these companies living up to tech's promise of global connectivity, and then on the other, they're entangled with actions that contribute to severe human rights issues.
Exactly. But here's the twist. Though the report is compelling, it comes with a disclaimer. The UN reports, while morally resonant, don't actually carry legal weight. So, legally speaking, there's no mandate forcing these companies to change their practices, right?
Right, correct. It's this big, almost paradoxical situation. Ethically, the report demands accountability, but legally, companies aren't bound by it. And that raises the question, can public pressure alone really drive a shift in corporate behavior when profit is the primary motive?
No doubt about that. Yeah, and it makes me wonder, if a company like Microsoft or Google is seen as complicit, does that undermine public trust in technology as a whole? Because these are companies that a lot of us use every day, almost indispensable to how we work and live.
Totally. I mean, it's like expecting your favorite app to suddenly broadcast ethical imperatives. It's not something consumers are used to associating with their tech. Yet, if we start questioning these alliances openly, it might have a
Absolutely.
ripple effect.
It's almost as if you're asking these companies to choose between making a profit and upholding fundamental human rights. And that frankly puts them in a very difficult position. It's a moral tightrope, isn't it?
Yep, that's exactly it. And there's a deeper layer here, too. The report suggests that behind the curtains, these companies provide technological and financial support in subtle ways that help maintain, the existing power structures. It's like they're a cog in the machine of geopolitical power.
Certainly. I mean, just picture it. Billions of dollars in revenue, global influence, and then this irony that their infrastructure might also be fueling a humanitarian crisis. It's a stark, uncomfortable reality.
Right. And the report isn't shy about naming the companies. They don't beat around the bush. The allegations are direct, laying a moral challenge before these corporations. But interestingly, Israel dismisses these findings as groundless, adding that such claims will join the dustbin of history.
Yeah, indeed. That dismissal really speaks to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? It exposes a huge divide, a divergence between international human rights concerns and state-level political agendas. How do you think the public should navigate this kind of contradictory narrative?
Well, it's all about questioning narratives. People need to demand transparency and accountability, even if, as you said, these companies are part of a broader, very complex geopolitical structure. It's like peeling an onion. Every layer you remove reveals another, more intricate one.
Truly. And there's also this angle about consumer activism. If enough people start, say, boycotting these companies or pushing for divestment, could that be a real catalyst for change? Or is it too optimistic given their embeddedness in global supply chains?
Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, think of it like this. If a chef relies on a specific spice known to be ethically dubious, it's challenging to just switch recipes without altering the whole dish. The link between profit and political support is so deep-rooted.
Definitely, yeah. But then, I wonder, could pressures lead to a scenario where these companies reassess their involvement? I know some critics might argue that expecting such major corporations to overhaul their strategies is a bit naive, given all they stand to lose.
I get that argument, but think back to how corporate strategies shifted when environmental concerns gained momentum. Initially, it seemed impossible to change, but then public pressure forced a lot of companies to adopt greener practices. It's not impossible, just challenging.
Exactly. That's a fair point. Still, there's an inherent risk they might only make superficial changes to quell criticism instead of addressing the heart of the issue. There's a tendency to pay lip service to ethics when the economic stakes are high.
Right, and that's where skepticism is warranted. If these changes don't translate into real accountability, then it's just a PR move. And then you get back to square one, with passive consumer pressure doing little to shift the broader systemic dynamics.
Absolutely. I also noticed that the report tapped into voices like that of a former Microsoft software engineer who resigned over these issues, along with human rights lawyers with direct experience on the ground. That insider perspective adds a lot of weight to the claims.
Yes, exactly. These first hand accounts provide an insider view into corporate decision making. It's like hearing from someone who was there, a bit like receiving an unvarnished look behind the curtain, which definitely makes the allegations more resonant.
Exactly. But here's a challenge. Even with these compelling testimonies, there's a counter narrative that argues businesses are just following the flow of international politics and market forces. It turns into a debate over whether profit motives can ever be fully separated from the ethical dimensions of global conflicts.
Right, and that criticism is itself valid. It's a complex web markets, politics, ethics, all interwoven in ways that defy simple explanations. Despite that, wouldn't it be fair to hold companies to a higher
Absolutely.
standard given their influence?
That higher standard, though, raises the issue of accountability. If multinational corporations start re-evaluating their role, is it because of genuine moral awakening or just a strategic pivot to save face in market perceptions?
That's a critical question. And it might be a bit of both. Companies are smart enough to see that public sentiment can, over time, directly impact their bottom line. So there's an incentive to change, even if the initial reason is to protect profits.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it boils down to, can ethics and profit coexist? Or are they doomed to conflict, especially in such high stakes, politically charged contexts?
It's a perennial debate, really. In situations like these, the lines blur so much. You could say it's like trying to balance on a knife's edge. Any small misstep might lead to dire consequences for human lives.
Spot on. And it brings up a more significant discussion about international law and moral responsibility. Even if these UN reports lack legal force, they serve as moral compasses that can steer public discourse.
Exactly. And that moral compass is crucial. Even if the law isn't there yet, the debate itself can, over time, influence policies. It might be a slow process, but history has shown us that public pressure eventually leads to change.
Indeed, absolutely. So, where do you see this heading? With all this tension between corporate interests and human rights, is there any realistic path toward meaningful change?
Well, I think it's possible, but it requires a collective effort. Consumers, investors, and policymakers all need to shine a light on these practices. It's like building a house. You need every brick to support ethical oversight.
Right, for sure. I like that analogy. The ethical house. But again, there's that issue of scale. How do you mobilize a global consumer base to affect companies entrenched in international politics? That seems like a monumental challenge.
Totally a monumental task. Yet, with our digital age, information spreads so quickly, even a single expose can tip the balance. It's like igniting a spark that can potentially lead to a fire of change if managed well.
Exactly. There's also the criticism that such calls for divestment or boycott might inadvertently harm ordinary people, like employees or communities dependent on these jobs. So, is there a risk of unintended consequences when we push for rapid changes?
That's a solid point. Change must be thoughtful. It's not just about cutting ties instantly, it's about rethinking how companies operate. The transition needs to consider the livelihoods of many, not just the top executives making policy decisions.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a catch-22 then. You want change but not at the expense of the ordinary worker. Balancing that is no doubt one of the biggest challenges ahead.
Right. And while the UN report doesn't carry legal power, it serves as a call to action, a wake-up call for both the public and the companies themselves. Maybe that's the starting point for a broader debate on corporate ethics in conflict zones.
Indeed. I think it ultimately comes down to whether global consensus can shift towards prioritizing human rights over unexamined corporate gains. And that, as you said, might require a sustained collective push from all sides.
Absolutely. It's a long road ahead. But as more voices join the conversation, be it from human rights experts, former insiders from these companies, or yes, even everyday consumers, pressure could build enough to force meaningful change.
Yeah, exactly. So, while the situation is complex and steeped in historical, political, and economic entanglements, these discussions might just be the seed of a larger movement, one that demands accountability and ethical responsibility at the highest levels.
Indeed, it's all about keeping the pressure on and continuously asking tough questions. Can we really accept that profit trumps human lives? Only time and persistent voices will tell.
Absolutely, yes. Well, that was a deep dive into a really tough subject. Thanks for walking through these layers. It's conversations like these that remind us why critical scrutiny of power structures is so essential.
Right on. Let's keep questioning, engaging, and pushing for that balance between ethics and profit. Thanks for sticking with me through this discussion.
Thanks for the insights. Until next time.